No, 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 no. Okay, so climate change. Um, why is there any question about it? Because I know it's complicated. Like we all like, well, most of us, at least people in my circle, we fully believe it's happening. But you talk to someone who really knows about climate change, and although confident about it, it is more complicated than most people realize. Correct?
Yes.
Okay. Tell us a little bit about climate change and the kind of research that goes into it to give us the numbers we hear.
So I think your premise is spot on, is that it is very complicated, and that can be alienating to a lot of people. Um, I was, what, 7 years old in the year 2000. Um, and I remember when it was called global warming, and that was the parlance.
Yeah.
That was what we called this phenomenon. And I think climate change as a political and policy issue, even not, let's not say like strictly political, but as an occurrence, as a thing that could or should be addressed by public policy. I think that has been damaged by inconsistent branding, in a similar way to what we've seen with like masks over the course of the current pandemic, where it's like initial CDC guidelines are like masks might not help, and then a couple months later they're like actually masks are incredibly important. But even when you're saying that masks are very important, people are going to look back and say like, well, you were saying something different, 3 months ago. I think that really happened with climate change, where people were like, well, so you're calling it climate change now? Like, do you really know? Do you even know what's
Mm,
going on? And then some scientist is going to get up here and say like, well, actually, it contributes to extreme weather as well, and that is all true because it's just a very complicated, literal global phenomenon with like myriad different air patterns that are changing, glaciers that are melting, sea currents that are changing, monsoon patterns that are changing. But what somebody in the audience says is like, well, now you're talking about hurricanes. You were just talking about the ice caps. Like, get your story straight. So I think in like the public facing side of climate change science, um, there's a lot and it's difficult to communicate. And I think there's been a lot of public skepticism that's been inflamed by like inconsistent messaging. Um, I know that doesn't answer your entire question, but
no, but well, I think to fully answer the question, it would take 6 hours, and we really only have an hour. um, and I like how you related to the pandemic because I've thought a lot about the messaging with masks. And although obviously I'm a full supporter of wearing a mask, it clearly either confused a lot of people or made people unsure whether it was worth it or not with the updated messaging coming out. So that was really interesting. I have to say something about climate change. You probably know this, but my grandfather, Grand Jack, who has passed away, was the science advisor to Nixon, um, and he studied um, nuclear energy. That was his main field. But he was science advisor, and then I think he worked all the way through. He was head of science, I think, all the way through Clinton, which is pretty wild. But back in the '60s, one of his good friends asked him, "Okay, Jack, what are the three most important things that you could tell anyone about science?" And he says, "All right, come here, come in close." He says, "Global warming, global warming, global warming." Back in the '60s. So he was. I mean, he was brilliant. I'm sure I've talked about him before. He was probably the smartest person I've ever met. And but I just love that story. Just like that long ago, he was already like, we need to figure this out. We really need to figure this out.